We have some breaking news from Gaza where at least 25 people have been killed in Israeli attacks on 2 schools in the west of Gaza City. Our correspondent Hani Mahmoud is joining us now from Deir el-Balah in central Gaza. Hani, what more can you tell us about these attacks?
Yes, Deir, well, we're looking at a situation that happened in less than 24 hours after the bombing of yet another school in western Gaza City. That's in Sheikh Radwan district in the northern western part of Gaza City. And this time it happened to be 2 schools that turned into evacuation centers for the past months, sheltering refugees and displaced families from different parts of the Gaza Strip. Now, displaced families are not coming from particular areas. They're coming from different parts of the northern part of the Strip and Gaza City, fleeing the unpredictable bombs, the horror of the ongoing war. These schools are back to back. They are what separates between these 2 schools is the fence. One is a private school, educational facility. The other one is a public school, and they are back to back, filled with displaced families. They are eyewitnesses in the area describe these schools as overcrowded, the most overcrowded spaces available for displaced families in the central part of Gaza City. The bombing took place simultaneously at the same time. The 2 schools were struck relentlessly by multiple airstrikes, and several people reported to al-Ahli Baptist Hospital. So far, what we're getting from the hospital, the only operational hospital in Gaza Center, al-Ahli Baptist Hospital, 25 people transferred to the hospital, already pronounced dead. These are dead bodies were managed to be removed from the rubbles and from the dust that filled up the area into the hospital. There are more still under the rubbles. We're talking about overcrowded, packed space in 2 schools by the thousand. The number of people inside these 2 facilities by the thousand. We're looking at a situation, a context that is full of horror right now, bloodshed and more destruction. Something that is becoming, as we monitor how the situations have been evolving in the past few days, more of these evacuation centers are attacked systematically. The attention, it seems, by the Israeli military right now.
Okay. Hani, thank you. Hani, for that reporting from Deir el-Balah in the center of the Gaza Strip. Let's bring in Hamdah Salhut, who's joining us from Amman. Hamdah, of course, reporting from Amman because Al Jazeera has been banned from reporting from Israel. Hamdah, what is the Israeli military or the government saying about the targeting of 2 schools sheltering displaced people in Gaza?
Well, this is the 3rd school that's been struck by the Israeli army in just less than 24 hours. And in a lengthy statement, the Israeli military says that they struck these 2 schools because they are claiming Hamas was using them as, quote, command centers and to carry out attacks on Israeli troops. But of course, no evidence was provided for these claims. This is something we've seen from the army time and time again, saying that Hamas is using several different places, schools, mosques, hospitals, as command centers when we have never once seen evidence of these claims. The military is also claiming they took precautionary measures to make sure that the minimal damage would be caused to civilians, including, quote, using precise munitions. But it's a little bit difficult to believe when you see the images on the ground, when you hear our colleagues in Gaza reporting from the ground, reporting at least 25 Palestinians killed and several others who are stuck underneath the rubble. The screams of the Palestinians continuing, even at this hour, while our colleagues from Al Jazeera Arabic are live on the air, hearing the screams of Palestinians who are stuck under the rubble of these schools from the Israeli strikes. Now, the military is saying that, quote, Hamas is using these civilian areas and they are using civilians as human shields, a claim time and time again we've heard from the Israeli military in order to justify their attacks on displaced Palestinians in northern Gaza, in southern Gaza, in central Gaza, and especially on civilian infrastructure.
And Hamdah, we also hear over and over again from people on the ground in Gaza, as well as our correspondents, who say, look, the Israeli army and the military, they never give any prior warning even to people who are sheltering in these areas, allowing them time to find some other place to go to.
That's exactly right. The Israeli military has previously falsely claimed that they do give warnings, they do give some sort of knock prior to the airstrikes that they are alleging are targeting Hamas operatives, but that is simply not the case. We've heard from witnesses on the ground, from our own teams on the ground in Gaza, that that's not the case, that the Israeli army regularly carries out these attacks. I mean, look at what happened yesterday. 3 simultaneous strikes on a school where at least 17 people were killed, and the Israeli army is saying that they use precautions. They try to minimize civilian casualties. But you see time and time again, Palestinians picking up body parts and remnants of people who've been killed and injured in these attacks. So there is no prior warning when the army is attacking civilian infrastructure, especially when they allege that Hamas is using the facilities, when in fact there are thousands of forcibly displaced Palestinians using these schools and hospitals as a place to stay, as a place to escape the fighting, as they've been displaced time and time again. But the military says and continues to claim that Hamas is using these facilities for military purposes, which we have never once seen proof of.
And in this case as well, Hamdah, just for confirmation, I mean, up until this point, the Israeli army has not provided any evidence to support their claims.
That's exactly right. The military time and time again releases lengthy statements saying that Hamas is using civilian infrastructure for military purposes. In this specific day, on these 2 strikes on these schools, they say that Hamas was using these schools to plan and carry out attacks on Israeli troops on the ground. And remember, these are areas that the Israeli army has said time and time again, more than 6 months ago, in fact, that they have achieved near full operational control on the ground. But we see it over and over where they are continuing to face fierce resistance from Palestinian fighters. But nonetheless, they are still claiming that Hamas is using these civilian infrastructures, but never once has given this proof. And the biggest of all of these claims by the army was back at the raid at al-Shifa hospital, the continued attack, saying that Hamas was using it as a command center, which still, to this day, there has never been proof of. There has never been information or pictures or any sort of intelligence that the army is citing to back up their claims. We've seen this time and time again in this war that has so far killed nearly 40,000 Palestinians. And the Israeli military continues to make these claims without providing the evidence to the public, the media, or anyone else.
Hamdah, let me just ask you about developments a little earlier on today, where we did see reports of rocket attacks on Israel from the south of the Gaza Strip. Just talk us through what happened there.
Well, we're looking at least 5 rockets that were fired from southern Gaza, many of them intercepted, but some actually ended up hitting areas and causing fires. And again, this is also an area the military has said they've reached full operational control over, or partial operational control. They often claim these big strategic military victories on the ground. We've seen this again and again, especially in the invasions of Khan Yunis, the attacks on Rafah, saying that they have these big military achievements and that they have eliminated almost all of the Hamas brigades and fighters on the ground. These are claims from the army. But again, time and time again, we see that they are still facing Hamas fighters, Islamic Jihad fighters on the ground there, where these claims are actually false. They have not achieved this full operational control. They have not achieved these military and strategic victories that they often boast about. They've said time and time again they have eliminated the capability of fighters in Gaza to launch rockets. But just in the last several days, we've seen several projectiles that have been fired from Gaza, something that, of course, is driving the security establishment within Israel kind of crazy, because for 10 months, there have been continuous airstrikes, continuous bombardment, and somehow these fighters are still able to launch rockets, something that the Israeli military is constantly assessing and constantly looking on how they're going to continue their fight and the war on Gaza.
Okay, Hamdah, we'll let you go for now. Thank you for all of that reporting from Amman. And these are the latest pictures that we're getting right here on Al Jazeera of the 2 schools in Gaza that have been attacked, and the latest death toll is at least 25 people have been killed by these attacks on two schools where displaced Palestinians have been sheltering. Let's get an update once again from our correspondent on the ground, Hani Mahmoud, who's joining us from Deir el-Balah. Hani, what more are you hearing about these attacks?
Well, still the confirmed number of people who were killed in these multiple airstrikes at these two schools. Again, these schools are back-to-back. They're full of displaced families who've been sheltering inside these two evacuation centers. People are running to these evacuation centers because their neighborhoods, their homes, and their areas, residential areas, have been completely destroyed or severely damaged by the Israeli military to the point they become uninhabitable. They turn into a wasteland. What people do, they concentrate in these evacuation centers seeking safety, seeking protection, and away from the horror of the unpredictable bombs. Now, what's really concerning and horrifying, and we've seen this pattern happening for the past few days, the attacks, concentrated attacks on evacuation centers are happening without any prior warning whatsoever, something that contradicts what the Israeli military put in a statement that they're being cautious, they're trying to minimize the damage, but on the ground what we're seeing, there's no way, as people in a very frustrating tone, you can't minimize damage if you're not given a prior warning to a facility that is full of displaced individuals, already tired, exhausted. They've been in this situation for the past 10 months. There are more people. We're expecting the number to increase, the number of casualties, the number of people who are being removed from under the rubble and transferred to the hospital. And unfortunately, this has been happening for quite some time now. And what's really concerning for many of the people who are still in evacuation centers and haven't been targeted yet, this attack has caused further internal and forced displacement as people feel that their tiny bit of remaining safety have been shattered completely right now. Not even evacuation centers that have been identified and designated as areas for displaced families are not safe for them. We've seen in the past how hospitals turned into bad zone by the Israeli military to the point that entire health facilities being completely destroyed or severely damaged. The only operational health facility is here in the central area and doesn't have the capacity to provide proper health care or medical care to those who are needed. And right now, when the attacks are happening in this manner at evacuation centers, soon enough we're going to see more people are left in the streets. They're exposed to sky predators, drones, surveillance drones, and attack drones that are finding them as easy prey being under attack.
Hani, how many people and how many families would have been sheltering in these two schools? And which areas of the Gaza Strip would they have come from, or have they come from practically all over?
Well, the past 10 months have been quite difficult for Palestinian families across the Gaza Strip. Some of these families have been displaced more than 3 times, 5 times. It's shocking sometimes to hear people talking about the 7th or 8th times being displaced. And they're coming from different parts of Gaza City and the northern part of the Strip. That includes Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, and the eastern neighborhoods of Gaza City, including Shijaiya, that has 100% been obliterated when the Israeli military invaded it a few weeks ago. It becomes quite uninhabitable. It was declared by the municipality as disastrous area. It created catastrophic situations, living conditions, and catastrophic situations for people to the point they had to leave the area and seek shelters in these evacuation centers, mainly the schools. We're talking about hundreds of displaced families. And if we look at the Palestinian society, the way how it's socially constructed, we're talking about the average family is made of 5 to 7. And in some cases, your family is made of 10 people. And the vast majority are children. If you multiply that by hundreds of families, we're talking about 1,000 people inside these schools, sheltering, seeking protection and safety from the horror of the unpredictable falling bombs. And this is exactly, it's not an exaggeration to say it's unpredictable horror of the fallen bombs, because there are no prior warnings whatsoever. Everything that has been put out by the Israeli military, every narrative that is being pushed to pretty much described that the Israeli military taking cautions and taking necessary steps to protect civilians. Well, on the ground, what we're seeing is more children and more women and more elderly people and more young men coming in pieces or coming shredded, severely bleeding or severe burns, transferred to the hospital. That is the dominating scene. We've documented it. We've seen it happening with our own eyes, whether here in the central area or from the footage coming from the bomb site. Like yesterday, there were a video of people looking for remains, body parts of their relatives who were inside the school that was bombed in a Sheikh Radwan district. The same exact situation is happening again, repeating itself in what seems to be a new normal for Palestinians inside evacuation centers.
Hani, for those who have survived this attack or are injured, which hospital is operational in that area, and what is the state of that hospital right now?
Well, the only semi-operational health facility in Gaza City and the entire northern part is al-Ahli Baptist Hospital. That's at the center part of Gaza City, namely the Gaza Square area. It's a hospital that has been pushed repeatedly out of service. And to remind our viewers that the initial weeks of the war, the Israeli military bombed the school and killed close to 200 people who were sheltering in the courtyard of the hospital. It's running at a very low capacity here. Many of the doctors, including medical missions who made it to the hospital, described horrific situations inside the hospital. Some of them even went to describe that it's not a hospital anymore. It's more of a morgue here. The only thing that is provided there is receiving the dead bodies to prepare them for burial because there isn't any medical care taking place whatsoever.
Thank you so much. My apologies, but we are just coming to the top of the hour, so we will let you go for now. We'll speak to you again in the next couple of minutes. These are the latest pictures that we're getting from Gaza City, where Israel has attacked 2 schools which had been sheltering displaced Palestinians. So far, we understand at least 25 Palestinians have been killed. That death toll expected to go higher. We're back in a
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.